This hour on The Green Show on the Corliss Radio Network, Scott Newark is going to be back with us. He's done some calculating on when the first eligibility dates are for parole opportunity for Omar Khadr. He'll share that with us later on in the hour. Paul Henderson, 40 years ago, scored the 3 winning goals that gave Canada the Summit Series victory over the USSR. Still not in the Hall of Fame. I started to try to get Henny into the Hall of Fame in 1995. Tretiak's in there, the guy he scored on, but Paul Henderson isn't. Well, Paul Henderson will join us later on this hour. And we're going to begin with Gerald Celente. Gerald Celente is one of our most favorite guests. If I just look at email count from listeners who want to hear someone return to the show, Gerald Celente is right up there. Right up there. He's the publisher of the TrendsJournal. He's founder of the TrendsJournal Research Institute. He's considered by many to be the most accurate interpreter of trends and where the world is headed. He's a regularly featured guest on major U.S. media and on this program. He's been called the Nostradamus of our time, and he'll be appearing in person in Vancouver on the 13th of October at the SEED event 2012, and the website is TrendsResearchInstitute.com. Gerald Celente. Gerald, it's great to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate it. And I like what you said, an interpreter of trends. You know, in all the years I've been doing this, 32 years, that's the first time I've heard that. And that's all it is, really. It's just interpreting what's already out there.
Well, I want you to do something for us out of the gate, if you will, please. Would you interpret what's going on with this news story that has dominated headlines, particularly in the last couple of days, about a cyber attack on major banks? You've said that we're already engaged in the first great war of the 21st century, Gerald. Is this part of it?
Well, let's go back. Remember the cyber attacks against Iran with the Stuxnet? And on and on. No, there's no end to this. It's war, and it's beyond the cyber attacks. Anyone that looks at what's going on around the world, how about the 1 million-plus people that are taking to the streets in Portugal as we're speaking? Millions more in Spain. A couple of million more in Greece. Look what's going on in Bahrain. There's a revolution going on. And there's a civil war going on in Syria and Libya. Look what's going on over in Yemen. You know, how much more data do the people have to add up before they can see that the first great war of the 21st century has begun? They're waiting, Roy, for an Archduke Ferdinand moment so they could say, aha, now we're going to war. What's going on now between China and Japan? And China with the other countries over disputes in the South China Sea and other areas, including the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, South Korea, that is, and it's one after another. And then you have the economic meltdown. So, no, it's underway.
It's just not the kind of war that we've been historically exposed to. That we don't have massive convoys crossing the North Atlantic to take on Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Europe. This is a different war. This is a 21st century war.
Well, you really hit the nail on the head. You know that saying, Roy, that generals keep fighting the last war?
Yes.
That's what they're doing again. They're fighting the last war. They're building trenches for tanks so that they don't cross the Maginot Line as they fly over it. They're building aircraft carriers and nuclear weaponry and defense shields to fight against suitcase-sized weapons of mass destruction. They're fighting the last war. And by the way, that's why they keep losing the current ones. You know, as an American, I'm only looking at the facts of what America's done in wars. This country hasn't won a major war since World War II. They lost the Korean War, and then they doubled down on that and started the Vietnam War, lost that one. Hey, that one wasn't enough. I got an idea. Let's start a war in Afghanistan. Oh, you can't win that one? While that one's going on, let's start another one in Iraq. Hey, I got a better idea. Let's have a humanitarian mission and invade Libya. Roy, we got to do something about what's going on over there in Syria, and Iran's a threat. Let's move more aircraft carrier fleets into the Persian Gulf.
So where are we ultimately? I can't say ultimately, but where are we headed in the short term? And Gerald, before you answer that, let me add this. Not only do we fight the last war, but we fight election campaigns the same way we've been seeing them fought for decades, for centuries. There doesn't seem, sure, they introduce the internet and they introduce technology, but the fundamentals of fighting an election campaign have remained static for decades and for generations, and we're seeing it again in the United States presidential election, and you're harsh in your assessment of the leaders in positions of power, political power globally. So I've thrown a whole lot at you, Gerald. Try to make some sense of the nonsense I've just thrown your way.
Well, what was the first one? The second one was the campaigns.
The first one was, I can't remember now. The second one was so brilliant, I've forgotten the first one. No, I said, where are we headed? Where are we headed in the short term?
In the short term, it's very difficult. In the short term, it really depends on how fast they escalate war. If the United States or Israel attacks Iran, we are saying it's the beginning of World War III. That's going to be the tipping point. What's going on throughout the rest of the world, it's as old as off with their heads. And that's what you're seeing is class warfare. There was never an Arab Spring. I mean, we wrote about it before it happened. See, they could care less if it's a dictatorship, a benevolent dictatorship, a king, an emir, or a democracy, as long as they have food in their mouth, a roof over their head, and clothes on their back. And in Egypt, they had none of those. The average wage in Egypt, depending on whose data you were looking at, is between $4 and $10 a day. Same in Tunisia. Far too few have much too much, and way too many have much too little. So you're seeing the entire socio-economic system collapsing. On the issue of the presidency, am I harsh about the world leaders? It's a disgrace. I saw that Cameron on the Letterman show, yucking it up in a two-bit act that wasn't fit for vaudeville. What kind of dignity does a man that calls himself the Prime Minister, not of England, make sure you get this straight, David, it's the United Kingdom, yucking it up with a two-bit over-the-hill comic? Could you imagine Eisenhower doing that? Could you imagine Churchill doing that? Could you imagine Roosevelt doing that? I have one better for you, Roy. Let's go back to the United Nations meeting last week in New York. After all the world leaders come in to talk to the General Assembly, and then they talk among themselves. But not President Obama. He didn't have time. That's right. He had to appear on The View with the ladies of The View. So he canceled all of his meetings. It's the presidential reality show. There's Mitt Romney, standing, in front of bags of cement in front of a plant near Pittsburgh, or sitting on a bale of hay to make as though he's just one of the guys. It's the presidential reality show. And the world leaders, the people that created all of these problems, the economic problems, that's right, by deregulating the industry, the foreign policy problems by destabilizing the entire Middle East, on and on and on, the same people that had their hand in making these things happen, now they get out there and say, I got the plan to fix it.
Gerald, hold on. We're going to come back with Gerald Celente on the Roy Green Show on the Corliss Radio Network. It's TrendsResearch.com, and Gerald will be appearing in person in Vancouver on the 13th of October at the Seed Event 2012, and the TrendsJournal for the summer is out in the fall. And, you just go to TrendsResearch.com, and you'll get all the information that you need. Now, Gerald said something about Arab Spring, and when we come back, I want to say something about Arab Spring as well. Stay with us on The Roy Green Show. Follow me on Twitter at The Roy Green Show, and the email is roy@roygreenshow.com. Gerald Celente, the publisher of the TrendsJournal, and he's the founder of TrendsJournal Research Institute, and you can go to trendsresearch.com. On the 13th of October, he'll be appearing in person in Vancouver at the Seed Event 2012. He's such a popular guest on this program. It's always great to have him with us. And Gerald, I have other questions for you, but you mentioned Arab Spring. And I'm going to say to you that I got so tired of hearing media people use the term Arab Spring, because the more they used it, the more I became convinced they had no idea what they were saying. Somebody said Arab Spring, and the rest of them just followed along. And it comes back to the point that I've been making forever on the show, and that is there aren't enough reporters. There are just too many repeaters.
Well, we have you still have that English in your blood. You're more polite than I am. We call them prostitutes, and that's what they are. They're just repeating the lines that are fed to them, and and the same people that didn't see it coming are now saying what it is. And as someone that interprets the trends, and having called it now a TrendsJournal, saying it was going to happen, we know why it's happening. Again, one of my sayings as a kid growing up in the Bronx and then moving to Yonkers is that when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And the people are losing it. They're tired of this corruption, this greed. And they're fighting back because they don't have anything. What does it take to wake people up? And then again, on the people's behalf, they keep voting in the same people. I'm not voting in this election. I will not vote for a lesser of two evils. I do not go out with them. I don't do business with them. I don't associate with lesser of two evils. Why, in God's name, would I vote for one to run my country and affect my life?
So then, does it matter ultimately globally whether the next president is Mitt Romney or a return for Barack Obama? Does it matter?
Does it matter if the Gambinos or the Bonanos are running the crime family? Of course it doesn't. There's not a dime's worth of difference between them. It's like it's a two-headed one-party system. And I'm not saying this is a spewing out rhetoric. I could go over all the facts. I could go over Obama coming out his first day on the job. I'm going to close Guantanamo. I'm going to end these egregious Patriot Act and restore habeas corpus, when he does the exact opposite and institutes the National Defense Authorization Act. I'm afraid to I will not talk to media in Bahrain or Iran or anywhere else, because if I'm accused of having contacts with a terrorist group under the new National Defense Authorization Act that Obama signed on New Year's Eve of this past year when no one was watching, I could be taken away by the military with no judge, no jury, no charges, no writs of habeas corpus, no trial. I'm not making this up. Under Obama, look at the Nobel Peace Prize winner and starts a war in Libya. And I could go on, whether it's fracking, the environment, everything that the people vote for him that like him, he's against. And Romney will say anything at any time for any reason to get where he wants to go.
What I found really interesting, one of the things I find interesting is, and the reason I asked you about Romney and about Obama and whether it makes any difference, one of the reasons is how many individuals responsible, or at least partly responsible, for the economic collapse internationally, which began in '08, have seen the inside of a courtroom, let alone the inside of a prison cell? And how often have you heard either President Obama or Governor Romney call for that reality? I don't hear them.
Not only haven't you heard them, Roy,
I won't hear them.
I ask you to name me one head that rolled on Wall Street. Just this past week, what was it? Either Citigroup or I think it was Bank of America just paid like a $2.5 billion fine. One of those two, for rigging the game, lying to people about what their positions were with companies that they bought. They get fined $2.8 billion. What did it happen on its own? Do you see anybody going to jail for it? Look at the Goldman Sachs gang. They pay a $555 million fine, but we're not going to admit any wrongdoing or having any admission that we knew what was going on. We either deny or accept the responsibility, but we'll pay the fine. The most minor violation committed by any of us. Boy, there's a strong arm of the law. Shove it to us. Oh, here's another one under Obama, talking about shoving it to us. The Obama administration were friends of the court. I love that term. Friends of the court that now allows, if I say I had, one drink too many, which, I do from time to time, that goes a little bit over the limit, and if I was driving, which I would never do, of course, and I got pulled over and I got a ticket and they threw me in jail, take off your clothes, Celente. What, are you kidding me? I just got to take off your clothes. That's right, bend over. Or a woman, do whatever we want to her. Under the Obama administration, as a friend of the court, the Supreme Court ruled that now they could strip search anyone for any minor violation in this country. So when you say, is there any difference between them? Where America's going, there's no difference, and all Romney does is talking about ratcheting it up. The only difference is who's going to destroy the country the slowest.
I have time for one more question. I have lots more questions, but I have time for only one. As far as the future's concerned, you write, quote, only the names change, but the characters stay the same, end quote. So, is everything for the foreseeable future bleak globally?
We're putting out the Autumn Trends Journal, and we're just finishing it up. And my conclusion is this. The future is bleak if we all decide to be slaves on the ship of state. The future will be great if each individual rises to the highest level within them that they're capable of doing, honing each unique talent that you have, and doing unto others as you want them to do unto you. To step forward, speak out, and create the kind of future that we want, rather than putting it in the hands of others. To me, Roy, that's the only way out. Is when, if you eat junk food, listen to junk music, watch junk entertainment, your heart and soul will be filled with junk. Let's raise the level, start it with the individual, think of what you eat, think of how you dress, think of what you do, think of your actions. To me, when everyone rises to a higher level of consciousness, that's right. The only way civilization will change.
Gerald Celente, you're a huge favorite with my listeners, and thank you so much for the time today, and I'm looking forward to having you back, and you'll be in person in Vancouver, October 13th of the Seed Event 2012. Folks, go to TrendsResearch.com. Talk to you again soon, Gerald. Thank you.
Thank you.